All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Shannon. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the program manager for CMAP, which is the Southeastern Massachusetts Agricultural Partnership. We are the buy local organization for Norfolk, Bristol, and Plymouth counties. So we offer technical assistance to farmers, fishers, and food producers. And one of the formats we do this in is these kinds of skills workshops. So as we go today, just know that if you are in Southeastern Massachusetts and you are a little bit lost, I am available for some one-on-one assistance as well. Or if you walk away from today and you are like, I want to dive even deeper, I can work on some one-on-one work with you as well. So just keep us in mind for anything that comes up out of today or anything that is on your mind outside of spreadsheets as well. Just a few things to know. I'm recording this right now, so you'll receive the recording as well as you'll receive the sample spreadsheet again shortly after this workshop, either tonight or tomorrow morning. And it's free and accessible to everyone, so feel free to send it around to your farming friends and anyone that you think would find it useful. I also want to make sure you all know that we want to hear from you as well. You all have your own experiences with farming spreadsheets, whether you use them for crop planning or timesheets and payroll or budgeting. And Joan is our expert today in spreadsheets, and you are all our experts in farming. So I definitely would love for it to be as much of a conversation between all of us as possible. So feel free to turn your video on. We'd love to see your faces. You won't show up on the recording if that's something you're worried about, unless you unmute. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joan. Joan Menard is joining us today. She's a Southeastern Massachusetts local and a big farm supporter and a spreadsheet whiz. So go ahead and take it away, Joan.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Hello, everyone. Joan Menard, Dartmouth, Massachusetts. I'm been living here on the South Coast for about 10 years now. Absolutely love the farm coast, and my husband grows most of the food that we eat during the season, and off season we buy from Skinny Dip every week. So hi, Hannah. I've been in the computer industry for longer than most of you have been alive. And I've been working on spreadsheets for that entire time. So I've taught spreadsheet classes and other computer classes to adults at the college level, and any chance I get, I try to share my knowledge with people, because I know that most people learned how to use a spreadsheet because someone sent them one. No one said, I'm going to teach you how to use a spreadsheet. They said, here's my spreadsheet. You opened it up and you went, oh, okay, well, I kind of get this. And you worked with it as best you could, but perhaps never really had any formal training in it. So I'd like to bring some kind of structure to that and help you in that way. And then also during the pre-class survey that Shannon sent out, we got some feedback about some things in particular that you'd like to see or like to learn or like to know a little bit more about. And so we will hit on those things. Did I forget anything, Shannon?
I did, and that is good. We have a tiny little poll here that I'm going to launch right now to just see one more time which platform you use typically for spreadsheets. So you should see that on your screen now, and that will just be useful. We might find ourselves in breakout rooms in a little while. Joan is particularly versed in Excel, and I have some Sheets background, so we might just divide ourselves up based on that in a minute. So let's see, almost everyone's answered. Cool. So I'm gonna close the poll.
Very good.
And there you go.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen, and do feel free to raise your hand anytime you want me to stop or clarify something or have some sort of question. I'm going to start out by opening a blank workbook. A workbook is what a spreadsheet is. A worksheet are the sheets in a workbook. So this is a blank workbook with a blank worksheet. And again, I'm just going to go over some basic terminology because I think it'll make sure we get it all on the same page. So the intersection of a column and a row is called a cell, and a range of cells is a rectangle that contains more than one cell. So in this case, this range is range D3 through F7. And so we'll often, or I will say, you know, go to cell such and such, or highlight range such and such, and that's what I'm talking about. And obviously, you know, you click and drag to make those ranges happen, or click in a cell to arrive at one, or click on a letter to highlight an entire column, or click on a row to highlight an entire row. So just a little basic navigation there. One thing I've coined is what I call the all button. And the all button is this space immediately to the left of the column A and above the row column, or excuse me, the row 1. And I call it the all button because when I click it, it highlights all of the spreadsheet. This comes in handy when you do some more advanced features because you want to be sure that you get all of your cells included in whatever operation you're doing. So sometimes I might say to you, click on the all button, and then we'll do a sort, for example. So again, just basic terminology. Now, if I'm going to enter some information into cell A1 and I start typing it, it appears in two places. It appears in the cell itself, but it also appears in what's called the formula bar. And the formula bar is where you go to edit something after you have entered it into a cell. But also, again, for navigation purposes, I want to point out that there is a key on your keyboard called the escape key, ESC. And the escape key is pretty much always, unless you have some weird keyboard, in the very upper left corner of the keyboard. And when I press the escape key, whatever I was doing is going to be abandoned. So when I press the escape key now, my FJKL is going to disappear. And that's handy because sometimes you're doing something else and you go, oh, and I put that in and I go, well, no, I don't want that. Well, you could just hit the backspace key, or you could hit the enter key and then go back to the cell and hit the delete key. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. But if I just accidentally put something in, I've done that in multiple cells, I didn't need to do that. But if I just accidentally put it in that cell A3, I can hit the escape key and that gets me out of that. Another reason why that escape key is really important is sometimes you're working in the spreadsheet and all of a sudden it's like you're frozen. You can't do the thing you want to do. You can't even click on a menu. You can't do anything. Well, often it's because you're partially through the process of doing something and you maybe didn't even mean to do it. To get out of that, if your screen feels frozen, can't click on anything, it's often the escape key that will allow you to escape from that situation. So it's a good key to know about. Doesn't hurt anything if I hit it. Like right now, I can hit it all I want. Nothing's going to happen, so you can't hurt anything. Sometimes, again, for whatever reason, by accident, often, you find yourself somewhere that you didn't mean to be. So I'm going to hit the page down key a couple times, and now I'm on row 256. I'm going to hit the right arrow key, and now I'm over here, and I'm in cell BY. So I'm in BY 256. I don't want to be here. I didn't mean to be here. I want to quickly get back to where I was, and I could just hit the left arrow key or the page up key, and I can move one cell at a time, or I can hold down the control key. And on the Macintosh keyboard, that's the command key. When I hold down the control key and I press the key on the keyboard marked home, it jumps me all the way to cell A1 automatically. So control home will move you back to the very top of the spreadsheet. Often used when you're lost, but also quickly, a good quick way to get back to the beginning of things. If I have some information on my spreadsheet, and I've got some garbage here, obviously, and I highlight it, I have this convenient count on the bottom of the screen. It tells me how many things I have highlighted. just a quick and dirty way to get a count of the number of items in a column or in a row. If you have a situation like this, we've got more of a rectangle, and you highlight the whole rectangle, it's going to give you a count, you see, of all of the cells. So 10, not 5. If I wanted just the 5, I would have to highlight just one column worth. But did you notice that when I did have the rectangle highlighted, not only did I have a count, but I also had a sum because I had some numbers, and the total in column B of these numbers is this 15 that shows up at the bottom of the screen. And it also gives me an average. So without doing any formulas or anything fancy, you can get some quick and dirty information just from the, master layout of the worksheet. The last thing I want to point out on the screen, I need to move my Zoom screen out of the way, is what I've got going on up here at the top of the screen. So I have autosaves shut to off because I often do things in kind of an experimental way, and I don't want it to automatically save. I want me to do the saving, and I'm going to do that saving by clicking on this little floppy disk icon, and that's my Control S or Command S on the Mac to save my work. So if you have that autosave feature, you might want to shut it off just so it doesn't save something that you really didn't mean to save. Of course, I mean, it's nice if you forget to save, but I'm a chronic saver, so I don't have that problem. I also have a couple of other things here. This area of the spreadsheet, this very top row, these things are called the quick access toolbar. So I have a couple of quick access items. I have print preview because I like to just see how it's laying out before I send it to the printer. And then I also have a new document, a new workbook, and I could just click on that. Now, as is the case with everything with the computer, there's always at least 3 ways to do whatever you want to do. And so these are certainly not the only ways to do this, but it's just a time saver. There are things I use all the time, and I can use the quick access toolbar up here at the top to build those. Now, if I click on this little down arrow, I get the prompt, customize quick access toolbar. And these are things that they're saying, here are some common things that you might put in the quick access toolbar, and you could look for more commands. You could move the quick access toolbar to another location, or you could hide the quick access toolbar. The other way to get to the quick access toolbar is to go to File and then click on Options. And here you see quick access toolbar. And so I've got my print preview and my new file that were added. If I wanted to, I could add, say, fill color and move that over. And now when I click OK, I've added fill color to my quick access toolbar. You will stop me if I'm going too fast, won't you? Hope so. So let's talk about formatting cells a little bit, since that is a format cell function. This is definitely a case of multiple ways to format cells. So let's say we wanted to format these cells as dollars. We could either click on this $sign on the home menu, which is where I am here. I could right-click and choose Format Cells on this menu. I could choose Format Cells here and Format Cells, which would allow me to choose number. And I can specify if I do or do not want digits to the right of the decimal place, and whether or not I want commas if I have thousands, and whether I not want my negative numbers to appear as red or in parentheses, or both red and in parentheses, or just with a negative sign in the front. So now I've formatted those cells. I'm going to guess that unlike many people I teach spreadsheets to, you aren't building presentations for the most part. And so some of these fancier features, changing the font or, making things bold or italic or even building charts and things like that, it may not be something that you care much about. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on formatting, but know that there are a lot of choices for formatting. You can choose things like we have here just discussed, or you could make your dates look a certain way, or you could change the alignment so that all of your numbers, for example, instead of being right justified like these are here, you could make them left justified. We talked about font a little bit. You could put a border around the cells so that they had a dark line all around each one of these cells. When you could change the fill, which would be what we often would call highlighting. And so all that is what I've just done to this. So I'm not going to spend any time on formatting because I think that that's something that is a nice to have for presentation purposes. But what I will spend a few minutes on that falls under the category of formatting is column widths. So here we have a column width, and if I hover over it, don't make a liar of me, hover over it. Come on, give me a number. Not giving me a number. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to column width, and it's going to tell me that the column width is 8.43. Now that's the default column width for a standard worksheet. And I can do a couple of things. I can change the column width to some other number. And I'm in column A, so it's going to change that column to size 15. Or I can grab the line that separates the column letters from one another to make a double-faced arrow like I have here, and I can slide it and make it larger or smaller. I can highlight multiple columns and make them all the same size at the same time. So it's only the ones that I've highlighted, right? And I can do the same thing with rows. So if I want these rows to be fatter, I can highlight them and then get the double facing arrow on the line in between the row numbers, and I can click and drag and I can make them larger. So I think that's a pretty handy feature. Another handy feature having to do with formatting columns and rows is being able to hide them. So let's say you have a worksheet and you're going to have someone else work on it, and you know that this information is irrelevant to them. Let's say column B is not relevant, or maybe it's not even relevant to you at the moment, but you don't want to lose it. You can go to Format and choose Hide and hide column. And that column B now is invisible between columns A and C. Now to get that back, I'm going to highlight column A and column C, and I'm going to go back to Format Cells and go back to Hide, Unhide. And this time I'm going to say Unhide Columns, and I'll get my column B back. It's a little disconcerting not being able to see anybody's faces, so I'm going to turn you on. Okay, so
Joan, can I ask one formatting?
absolutely.
Thing? And maybe
Please
we can save it till the end, but I think people might be curious about conditional formatting. I know that a lot of people are using spreadsheets for their farm budgets, and I know that sometimes it's helpful, to see certain figures in a green text or a red text based on whether it's an income or an expense. So is that something we can talk about briefly now or at the end?
We can. So I haven't done that in a while, but clearly it's this conditional formatting choice, right? We would need to use a little logic in order to do that. And so, for example, you can have it evaluate whether or not the contents of the cell is greater than a number or less than a number or between two numbers or specifically equal to a number, or if the text contains a specific thing, and have the formatting change based on those criteria. So that's absolutely, it's a great feature. If you can think of an example, we can actually build it. So can you come up with one for me?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe I'll toss that back to the farmers in the room. In the spreadsheets that you all are working with, is conditional formatting something you all are familiar with and currently using? Does anybody have an example to share?
I'm not familiar with it, but my example would be I get products from different growers and I highlight the rows, like for grower A, I would want to highlight all of their rows yellow, for example. And so I just go through manually, or sometimes I do Control F and I do a search on their name. And that's how I find the row, and then I know how to highlight it.
Right. So in order to do conditional formatting in that scenario, each row would have to have the grower's name in the row.
Yeah, I do that, but they're all over. Like I might have, 60 rows, and this one particular grower is scattered throughout. So I just want to highlight all the ones that has that grower's name in it.
Yep. Okay, great. So I think we can do that. So I've got grower A, B, C, D, and E, and then grower A 3 times, just as an example. I'm going to highlight row 1 by clicking on the 1 before the column there on the way left. And then I'm going to click the insert button, which will allow me to insert a new row at the top. And I'm going to give this column a heading. I'm going to call it grower name. So now we're going to try this conditional formatting, and I don't know if I need to select the all button or the column because I haven't done this in a while, but let's see what happens if I just select the column, go to conditional formatting, and we're going to say if it is text that contains grower A, then we're going to fill it with a color. And you see how it's already giving us the example. So if instead I had some more information like quantity, and then just randomly put some numbers in here. And actually, let me show you a little trick with numbers that you may not know about. If I've got a series, you wouldn't do this for quantity, but I just wanted to show you quickly that it recognizes anything that's a series as long as you've got at least 3 of them. So now when I click and drag, I'll fill in with 4, 5, 6 without having to type them. So let's just use that as an example. Now I'm going to use the all button this time and now go to conditional formatting and go to rules, text that contains, and I'm going to put grower A. And it's still not giving me the whole row here. So, because you'd want to highlight the whole row, right, Jennifer?
Yes, I highlight the whole row.
Yeah. So that's just the color. I'm not sure how to get it to do the whole row. Just try one more time here. And then one of the things I find is that part of the trick is, yeah, it's just highlighting the actual grower, not doing the whole row. So I'm going to have to investigate that. But that actually, investigating is part of the trick. So one thing I do, Shannon, that has to do with helping farmers is I go to Eva's house every Saturday morning and help her with her computer and her telephone. And so one of the things that she always says to me is, how do you know what question to ask when you want to Google something? And it really is kind of an art of trying to figure out what exactly can I say to the computer for it to give me the result that I want. So that will be a challenge for that exact thing. So let's see if we can go to Google and put in how to use conditional formatting in Excel to highlight entire row. I don't know about the word entire, I might not like that, but let's see what happens. Highlight an entire row. It would be helpful to have the full row highlighted. So this is exactly what you wanted. And it says if you were to directly head to highlight cell rules and conditional formatting, you'd be highlighting the individual cells, which is exactly what happened to us. And so here is the little data set. And we want the whole row. Ooh, absolute reference. And it says this rule will set with begin with this formula. Use conditional formatting rule set with this formula. So conditional formatting. Go to new rule. Ooh, fancy. And use a formula to determine which cells to format. So C3 is the first cell from the column containing the word you're searching for. And so we don't want the header rows, it's just the data rows. So that's why the C3. And we're looking for anything in C3 that has the word eggs. And then we select fill. So it's a little bit more complicated, Shannon, than I want to really experiment on the fly, I think, on this one. And I also don't want to bore people while I figure it out. But you can see that it can be done. And that the search criteria that we used to find this page was how to use conditional formatting in Excel to highlight an entire row, and that gave you the answer. But
and we can try it out, Joan and I, and we can get back to you all.
Yeah.
But I think, oh, and Kian just commented that it did work. So that's awesome. And also, you know, conditional formatting, are there other uses that people can think of? I'm thinking, you know, in a crop plan or a seed order, you can highlight just your brassicas, or you can highlight, you know, just one specific variety of seed, and you can see when you're planting it. And it just is going to make it a little bit easier to track. Of course, I imagine, Joan, you're going to talk about sorting and things like that. So we can get to that in a minute. But conditional formatting is one of my favorites, and I want to make sure people know about it. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's very cool. It does throw into the mix that concept of absolute versus relative cell references. And on the pre-class survey that Shannon sent out, some people were spot on when with the answer to the question about relative formatting or relative references, but others were not. So let's just talk about that for a second, because it is in that description of the conditional formatting using the rule, which is this new rule thing that we were just looking at in Google. So, you know, I am about half a mile from Round the Bend farm. And so relative to Round the Bend, I'm a half a mile away, right? If I want to know what's a half a mile from me, I can say that Round the Bend farm is a half a mile from me. But if I move to Tiverton, now they're not a half a mile from me anymore, right? So in absolute terms, whatever is a half a mile from me doesn't change. But in relative terms, it depends on where I am. So things that are half a mile away from me are relative to where I currently am. So as a frame of reference, probably not a really good one, but a relative address is one that refers to a cell, for example, immediately to the left of the cell I'm currently in. So the relative address for the cell immediately to the left of me is A2, or excuse me, A5. 2 is a number. So I'm in B5, and the one immediately to the left is A5. That's a relative address. It's immediately to the left of it. But if I want to talk about B5 and I'm in cell, A5, and I'm in cell B3, then it's 1 to the left and 2 down, right? So that's relative to this cell. This one is 1 to the left and 2 down. This is important when you're copying formulas, because sometimes you want the formula to copy and for it to be a relative address, so that the new location of the formula looks at cells that are immediately above or immediately to the left, whatever the formula says. But sometimes you don't want that to move. So for example, if I put in this cell the number 10, and I want my formula, every formula starts with an equal sign. That's sort of a mantra. Every formula starts with an equal sign. So equals, and I want to say the cell to the left times the 10 that I put in cell C1. So I'm going to just move my cursor there, and you can see I've built that formula. So it's equals B2 times C1. This is a relative address formula. When I hit enter, I'm going to get the right number. But when I take this formula and I copy it to the cell below this, where I want to multiply 3 times 10 or 1 times 10, if I just copy this formula, it's not going to work the way I want it to. So I'm going to say Control C or Command C to copy, to put it into the clipboard. And then I'm going to Control V or Command V to paste. V is in Victor. Don't know why V and paste have anything to do with each other, but that's how it is. And now I'm going to get 150. Well, that's not my expected result. My expected result is 3 times 10. So what went wrong? Well, the formula said, take the cell to the left and multiply it times the cell above. So that is 150, but that's not what I wanted. So in order to make it an absolute reference, I'm going to change my original formula here to have dollar signs in front of the column and the row. And now I get my B2, the cell to the left, times not the one above this one, but specifically the absolute C1. So now when I copy this down, Control C, Control V, I get the number I expect because I've got that absolute reference in there. So that was all a long way of explaining why when we did the new rule thing here on this Google search, it wanted you to use a dollar sign in that formula, was because you wanted to be sure you used an absolute reference and not a relative reference. Sometimes that can be hard to get your head around, but looks like everybody's got it, so good. Okay, so let's look at the worksheet that I sent out. I'm just going to close this one and don't save. And here it is. And I've just got some sample data in here. And a couple of things that I want to do to make this more friendly for me. One is I'm going to highlight all of the columns, and then I'm going to just double click on any one of the lines in between the columns so that I can adjust the column widths automatically to fit the maximum size of any item in that column. So there are no items in column K, and this is the one that's making it be as long as it is, that are longer. And if I move, I'm going to do Control Home, And you can see that this one, it didn't size to the item, it sized to the name of the column. And you can see that paid is this nice skinny little column here. I'm just going to make that one a little bit bigger. So that's the first thing that I want to be sure that when you open your spreadsheet, you know how to do, and I'm sure you do. You all look like you are following right along.
Can you just tell me where you double clicked?
Yeah, I grabbed right. See how I make this double pointed arrow? I want to be right on top of the little line between the column letters. And as soon as I'm on top of it, I get this double arrow. And when I have the double arrow, I double click and it adjusts it. Now I adjusted this one manually, so that's not working. You know, it's not going to change it again because I manually made it this size. Does that make sense?
Yes, so you click on each one. I thought there was a universal command and they all.
No, they did. So here, let me, let's abandon that for a second. Don't save that. And let's go back to this and pull this one. Hence, I don't like autosave because I'm always abandoning things. So here they're all different. They're all the same size actually, and they're all too big, right? So I'm going to highlight all the columns that I want to size to fit exactly the largest item that's in any one column. And then I just can double click on any one of these, no matter, it doesn't matter which one it is, and they're all going to adjust.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then again, this one I adjusted manually. So like if I added something, say, let's say I added a state that was longer. I think if I double click now, it should, and it's got all its own little rules, so I could be breaking a rule here, but I think if I double click, and now I'm going to double click, doesn't matter which one I do. Yeah, see, it's not doing it because it already had been done. Well, worth a try. It is adjusting the row height automatically because it just fixed that Massachusetts when I changed the data. Okay, so a minute ago, we mentioned the idea of being able to do Control F or Command F to find things. And notice when I Control F, I get both find and replace. I actually always do Control H because that's the replace is the one I'm usually interested in, but they're the same. It's the same little dialog box that pops up. So here I could search and I could look for, say, the first person that has a CSA 16. And it would show that this row was the first one. And then I could hit find next and it would show me the next one, and find next, it would show me the next one. I could hit find all and it shows all of them down here in this little preview box. What I like to do is highlight my whole spreadsheet. So I use the all button and then I do Control H for replace. And let's say I realized, ooh, someone entered Yahoo instead of Yahoo for every one of the Yahoo email addresses. It was a mistake. So I can change Yahoo, I can't even say that, .com to yahoo.com, and I can hit replace all. And you just notice you keep your eye there on column K, maybe row 7, and you'll see that this email address, when I hit replace all, is going to change. So there's my Yahoo, and it tells me it made 7 replacements. So find and replace can be very, very helpful. I'm going to have show you a couple things, and I'm going to have you try doing the breakouts. So I don't know if you're following along. Can someone tell me, are you, raise your hand if you're following along and actually doing stuff in a spreadsheet as I'm talking. You just raise your hand by clicking the little reaction doodad. Okay, so it doesn't look like everybody is, so that's fine. Well, because we were expecting to do a breakout, so that's fine. right now, as I said before, we want to differentiate between a workbook and a worksheet. So I have one worksheet right now, and it's called data. So I'm going to use this plus sign to the right of the tab, and it will allow me, in the middle of doing something, I hit the escape key, so it'll stop doing it. Hit the plus key, and it's going to add a new worksheet to my workbook. So I have the data workbook, and I have the sheet 1 workbook. I can right click and rename. And when I rename, I can put some title here that's going to make more sense. So let's say we've got errors or something. I don't know, whatever your worksheet name is called. So now I have named them, and I can use that right click to reorganize them. So if I want to put the errors at the beginning, I can click and drag that up so that it's the first one. And it's not moving it for me. Why is it not moving it? There, let me click and drag it. Every new version of Excel has a little feature that I haven't quite noticed, but you can move them around, obviously. Let's move on to sorting. So we'll go back to the all button. And the reason you want to do that is you want to be careful that you don't sort the data only in one column. So let's say I wanted to sort by state, and I wanted to get all the Massachusetts lines together and all the Rhode Island lines together. If I only sort the state column, it's going to end up making a jumble. It will sort the states, but it's going to do it without any consideration for the fact that this state belonged to this town, and this town belongs to this PO box, and this PO box belongs to this person, and this person, you know what I mean? So you want to be careful when you do sort that you use the all button. And then, as is everything, there's 15 different ways to do this, but I'm going to go to the sort menu on the home tab, and I'm going to choose custom sort because it lets me specify what I want to sort by. So I'm not going to sort by email address. I'm going to sort by program name, and then I'm going to add a new level, and within that I'm going to sort by name. And then they're doing it from A to Z instead of Z to A, and that's fine. Notice it says my data has headers. The headers are the column headings, and I click OK. And now I've got them sorted by program name, and then within program name I have them sorted by name, but this is sort of useless because it's sorted by first name. So I want to show you a couple of cool features that can help you with this kind of problem. And that is text to columns. So I am going to insert a new column here to the right of the column that is the problem child. So this is the problem child. I want to separate the first name from the last name and put them in separate columns. So to the right of the problem child, I'm going to insert a new column. And then I'm going to highlight the problem child, and I'm going to go to the text to columns feature, which is in the data tab, and click on text to columns. Now what it's going to do is it's going to ask me, what is the thing between the first name and the last name that is going to trigger the separation? And the thing that's going to trigger the separation is what? Can somebody tell me?
A space.
Exactly. So text to columns, it's going to say, is it a delimited? In other words, is there something that's separating them? And we just said it was a space, so that's correct. Or are they a fixed width? And a fixed width would be the case if you had everyone who had a first name that only was exactly 3 letters, then it would be 3. But that's not true. So we're going to use a delimited. I'm going to click next in this little wizard. And it says, what is the delimiter? It's not a tab, it is a space, and it's showing me a preview. And I can hit next, or at this point I could just hit finish because I'm good to go. There's an opportunity here to do some data conversion. If there was something you wanted to do, like say you wanted to insert some special character like an @ symbol or something like that, you know, you could do that on the fly, but we're not going to. We're just going to hit finish. And now I've got my first name and my last name in 2 separate columns, and I can do the final piece to this, which would be to rename them. So really cool, powerful feature, comes in handy when you find that you've got some data that is merged into a single field and really needs to be separated.
Joan, can you split into more than 2 columns?
Yes, you can.
So I'm thinking, you know, anybody who uses spreadsheets or even Google Forms for employee timesheets, if
Yep.
you have them write in what their task was for the day, and maybe they separate it by a comma or a semicolon, you can probably go ahead and split those activities out if that's helpful to kind of see where people are working throughout the day. You can split those activities at the semicolon or at the comma,
Right.
and have different columns.
So-
we do have a question, unless you had anything more to say about
Nope.
splitting into multiple.
No, I could do an example of a multiples if you wanted, but no, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a question about, so you just created the error sheet there. How do we connect those 2 sheets to each other? So if we make a change, say in the data sheet, it also shows up in the error sheet.
Absolutely. So we're definitely going to get into that, but I'll be happy to give you an example right now. So let's say let's rename the error sheet and let's call it totals, because that will make more sense. And let's say that we have we want to see how much has been paid, right? So we're going to use a formula, total paid, and that formula is going to add up all of the entries on the data tab. So every formula starts with an equal sign. And in this case, I'm going to use a function called sum, which if you remember from arithmetic, the total or the end result of adding things together is a sum. So that's why that function is called a sum. And I'm going to open with parentheses, and then I'm going to come back over to the data, and I'm going to highlight everything that's in this column. And I can do that either by clicking and dragging, or I can click and then do Shift Control down arrow. And it's only jumping to where there are blanks, but if there weren't any blanks, it would jump all the way to the end. So we'll just keep going. So I'll try this with the highlighting instead, because there were so many spaces in there. And you see I'm still building this formula, and I come back over to the totals tab, and then I close the parenthesis. So to dissect this, what you have is, you know, the normal range B2 to B43 that you want to add up to produce a sum. But before that, you have the name of the tab and an exclamation point. And you could type this in manually, and that would work fine. But pointing is more likely to be correct, because you don't have to worry about making a typographical error or something like that. So now when I hit enter, I get nothing. Now, why is that? What is going here? Okay, so let's see if these are numbers or if they're text. So we're going to go to, get this thing out of the way. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to go to my formulas, or excuse me, my cell formats, and I'm going to make sure that I have numbers here. And it was on general, so I don't know. It could be that it wasn't. And I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to go back to my total. And I'm not seeing a total here. So why is that? Well, we're going to figure that out. Always a trip when you do things like that. One thing I want to point out is there is this refresh button. And it's often used with pivot tables, but it's also useful for when you make some changes, you may need to hit refresh to get something to happen. But that did not work. So let's do this. Let's just see if my concept of my sum is working properly. The word paid is in there, and I don't think it likes that. So I'm going to B2 though, and B2 was not in there. So maybe because there are spaces. So let's just try B6 through B11 and see if that's what the problem is. So I'm just going to change this to B6 to B11. And it still isn't doing it. So what the heck is going on? Well, that is how you do it. Of that, I am positive. Why that darn something is not working, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to figure that out. Does anybody have any thoughts? Does it not like my formula?
Your formula looks good to me. I don't know why it's working. It's not working
Yeah.
either.
It's really strange. So let's just use another example to eliminate the sum problem, but still demonstrate the question, which is, how do you get the data to show up on another sheet, right? So I'm going to insert a row here and go back to home, click the insert button. One thing I like to do is instead of having totals for columns appearing at the bottom of a list, I like them to appear at the top, because if they're at the bottom, then when you add new ones, you're constantly having to shift it down. So I'm going to try putting a formula here, and we're going to do the formula the old-fashioned way. So I'm going to click on the FX insert function. It's going to give me a lot of choices for different kinds of functions. And I'm going to use a math function. Yeah, maybe we'll use to, I'm not sure where it is. Where's the sum? Is it in here? Sum. And so it says sum these numbers. And so I'm going to double click on that, and it's going to give me a prompt. So adds a range of cells. So the first cell is B2, and the last one is B43, right? And I don't want B2 because B2 is where my total is going to be, B3. And it looks like it's not really doing a range. It looks like it's just adding those two together. Oh, so let's do it manually again, because I use this formula all the time. I'm going to highlight all of these cells. Oops, it moved it. Boy, I didn't think I'd get tripped up on such a simple thing. Behaving strangely. Now you see how it's building my formula in the formula bar? And so that is indeed the formula that I want. And I'm just going to close the parentheses and hit return. And then there's my total. So on this other spreadsheet, the total spreadsheet, I'm going to delete this one. I'm going to say what I really want is equals. And I'm going to come to the data, click on the cell that I want to bring over, and then hit enter. And there's my total. So again, it's, I think what happened was I was not pointing to the data spreadsheet. I was pointing to the total spreadsheet. Do you remember that this formula said totals exclamation point before?
That's definitely what it was. You're right.
Yep. So just have to have your head screwed on tight when you're doing it. And apparently I didn't have mine screwed on, but you can see that it's really just a matter of pointing, and you start with an equal sign. So whatever cell you want to fill in here, and let's just randomly say we're going to take cell C14. I'm going to hit from the data worksheet. So I'm going to hit the equal sign, and then I'm just going to go to the data spreadsheet. I'm going to find my cell C14, and then I'm going to hit enter. And again, you can type them in manually. So I could say equals data exclamation point C15, enter. And you can see that cell C15 is here.
Joan, I'm the one who asked that question.
Yeah, Hannah.
And I often am trying to, like, I will copy a large spreadsheet, but I want the changes on one to be reflected on the other. Can I do that with, like, could I say equals and then do a full spreadsheet? Is that how I would do it if I wanted the full spreadsheet to change when I'm changing one sheet? Does that make sense?
It doesn't make sense. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's
Say
okay. Yeah, I'm using it for crop planning, and I'll
Yep.
make my full crop plan, and then I'll sort it so I have a sheet that is like just the greenhouse sowing or something like that.
Yeah.
And I want, if I'm changing, a sow date or the number of trays I want to sow or something on one sheet, I want it to be reflected in the other one after I've sort of copied it into its separate sheet.
Right. So let's do this. Let's take this spreadsheet. So I click the all button, and I'm going to Control C to take the whole thing. And then I'm just going to move it over here and paste it so the whole thing gets in here. So now I've got 2 copies of this.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to make some changes here that, let's say I take out, let's say I just take out all of this data, because this is the only thing I'm really I care about. And maybe I make this change. So I'm just doing that. This is this is the fee. But not everybody paid, that kind of thing, right? So now what you're saying is, I want every time I change one of these, I want it to show up here.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the formula in one spot. And so it's going to be, let's do it the other way around. Let's do it here. So let me just wipe this out and put it here. And so I'm going to say equals, and then I'm going to come over to the totals, and I'm going to put click on this cell, and then hit enter. And now it's referring back to the totals. So what I'm going to do is, you see this green square in the lower right corner of that cell? I'm going to double click on that. And this works if there's something over here to the left. So I want to copy this formula down for every row that has an entry in column A. I could also just copy it, but if I double click on this little tiny green square, it's going to copy that down. And so now we look at what the formulas look like. So this is the one we built, right? Totals exclamation point B3, but it copied down using relative cell addressing, totals B4, B5, B6, B7. So now if I'm here and I make a change, let's say I add this one in, say this person paid exactly $100. Now I go over here to look at my data, and I see that that $100 is automatically reflected. Did that help?
Yes.
It's the copying. So you don't want to do the whole worksheet necessarily, but you want to build it for one row, or it could be one column depending on how you're set up. But in this example, it'd be one row. You build what it is that you want to be pulled from somewhere else, and then you copy that down.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you're copying that formula, and you can see the formula reflected up here in the formula bar.
Right. Now, in that example, can you make the change on either sheet? Like, will they go
No.
back and forth?
No, you cannot do that.
Okay.
You have to have some sort of master version.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, one thing you can do, and this is little tricky, and I'm not really prepared to do it right now, but I'll just tell you that you can protect a worksheet to prevent you from accidentally writing on top of a formula like this. Like you lose your head and you start to type 100 here, you're going to wipe this formula out. So you could protect this worksheet to keep you from entering the 100 here, so that it would stop you and you would remember, oh yeah, I've got to enter the 100 here, and then it will be reflected here.
That seems really useful for those of us who are sharing spreadsheet responsibilities across a farm crew or something like that. So
Right.
We don't all need to be Excel whizzes,
Right.
as long as our formulas are protected.
Yeah, I'm a library trustee for the town of Dartmouth, and I'm the financial secretary for the trustees, and the library director is not spreadsheet savvy. And so I ended up having to protect the spreadsheet where she was doing the data entry, because she kept writing on top of my formulas. It was making me crazy. So, you know, it can be done. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. Shall we continue the way we're going with me demonstrating? Is this working for everyone? What do you think, Shannon? Because I just keep talking.
Let's take a little pause and make sure everybody's still on the same page.
Okay.
We have some people saying that it's working for them. Are there any specific questions right now that we definitely want to make sure we address in the next hour?
Yeah, I've got some cool stuff to show you still, but happy to
Yeah.
answer questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I work a lot with like import ranges. So we have like one big master list of like crops and products that we then import into like multiple different spreadsheets. I'm curious if you change that original imported data set, will it change in all of the sheets that it's been imported into, or do you have to then go in and like refresh that import range in all those different spreadsheets?
Yeah, what we're doing here is called an external reference. If you're literally importing a file, then you would have to refresh it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I use external references a lot, just like all within the same spreadsheet, just between different like worksheets within that spreadsheet. But we have like our master list of products and crops that then is like referenced in like data validation. So we'll like, you will take that sheet, import it into a completely different spreadsheet. We work with Google Sheets specifically, and then that will work as like a list that lives in that spreadsheet that we can base off a lot of other data off of, and like doing data validation, etc. So you think I'd have to then refresh each spreadsheet that uses that imported sheet?
Again, if you're literally using importing, I believe the answer is yes. But if you're using external references between sheets, the answer would be no, it should work fine. So I have a brand new sheet here called Workbook 1. And I can say equals, and then go to that other worksheet, farmers, and grab, say, this total and hit enter. And it's going to show me this worksheet is where this value came from.
Gotcha.
So
that's cool. I did not know you could do it from like a whole different worksheet.
Absolutely can. And again, you know, you can type this in. It's not, you know, too bad. You can see that it's equals and then a single quotation mark followed by an open square bracket followed by the name of the other worksheet, and then the file extension .xlsx close square bracket, and then totals, which is the name of the worksheet totals, see down here, that we used for the farmers there. And then the actual, in this case, an absolute reference, $B, $2. So, you can type it in, but I find if you just hit the equal sign and then go wherever you want to go, all you have to do is find the thing. There's the 1500, and all I do is hit enter, and it's going to show up here, and it's going to give me that reference that I want.
Cool.
Now, if I can copy this reference down. Now, that did not work because it was an absolute reference. So that's a whole nother problem. But yeah, if I hadn't been using an absolute reference when I did that, I could have copied it like we did here.
So then does that, in your experience, does that work with Google Sheets too? That
Yes.
kind of reference?
Don't you think it does, Shannon? Absolutely.
Yeah, it does.
Yep. Yeah, an external reference works from workbook to workbook or worksheet to worksheet, either one.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah, good, good, good. So my general rule is if you get, 2 good things out of a workshop, it was worth your time. So I hope that's the case. So what I want to show you now, and then we can pause again. Somebody else wants to think of something, is the filters feature. So I'm going to click the all button because I want to filter every one of my columns, and I'm going to go to data, and then I'm going to hit filter. And it's going to add these square boxes with down pointing arrows to the top, to the row with my headings in every column. And it allows me to do things like this. I can say, well, what do we got for states? Well, I've got Massachusetts right on, but I got some blanks. Well, who didn't put the state in? So I hit the blanks, and now I get just the rows that have blanks. Well, they're row 45 and 46, which not only has a blank city, state, and zip, it has nothing. So that's not a concern. That's fine. So I can go back and I hit select all, and I see them all again. Maybe I want to see just who is from Rhode Island. And now I can see that I have just one Rhode Island entry. So you can filter multiples. So I can say, give me everybody who is in a first 8-week CSA. And these are all the people, but I could say, okay, well, in addition to that, give me all the people who live in Williston. And now there are the 5 people that are both this filter and this filter. And you can see that the little down pointing arrow turns to a little funnel shape to show you that those are the columns that are filtered. I find when you are filtering, sometimes you just have to go, okay, shut all these off and let's do that again, because I don't know what I just did. So turn them on and turn them off.
Joan, do the filters stay on when you save and exit and come back to it
Yes.
another day? Okay.
It does. In fact, one thing that's interesting to know, especially if you're working with other people, is if I'm on the data worksheet and I'm in cell, say D19, and I hit save, when I come back to this worksheet, exit, go here, go back to for farmers that I just saved at 410, it's going to bring me exactly to where I left off. So when I'm working with someone else, I generally do Control Home to move my cursor to the first cell in the upper left-hand corner so that when I relaunch the worksheet, that's where it lands. If you have a worksheet that's full of instructions, do this first, do this, and you want people to read the instructions, then you call the tab instructions. Sorry about my typing. And then this is where you save the worksheet with the cursor on this instructions. That way, when they open it up, that's the first thing they see. It's a good way perhaps for you to communicate with people who you're sharing a worksheet with. You could even call this, instead of instructions, you could call it message of the day or something like that. So you notice that my filters all stayed on when I saved this and brought it back up again. I love filters, use them all the time. They're also a good way to find data entry errors. Or like in this particular worksheet, okay, so which do we not have email addresses for? So I'm going to scroll down, get to the blanks. And now I see I'm missing email addresses for these people and I need to get them. Go back to data, go back to filter, turns it off, turns it on. Okay. Another thing that I really love and use all the time is freeze pane. So if I go to the view menu, I have a freeze pane dropdown, and there are 3 different ones. And usually I want to freeze the top row. And the reason I like to do that is because now when I scroll down, I don't have to guess what column I'm in, because the name of the column stays on the screen. See what's happening there? And I can do the same thing with the first column. So I could scroll to the right and have that first column stay on the screen. Or I can freeze columns and rows at the same time by just positioning the cursor directly below and directly to the right of the thing I want to freeze. So if I want to freeze both the first row and the first column, I'm going to position the cursor directly below and directly to the right of the thing I want to freeze. And I'm going to go to freeze panes and click, well, I've got this frozen. Let me unfreeze it. Do it again. Freeze and then freeze panes. So now I'm not saying freeze top row. I'm not saying freeze first column. I'm just saying freeze panes. And now both the top row and the left column are frozen. If you have a really big spreadsheet, that's really key. Good. So do I keep going? Do you want to stop and practice? What would you like to do?
I have a question,
Please.
Joan. Yeah, I guess it's sort of a design question that has to do with dealing with lots of small data. So I'm trying to I'm interested in improving how we do our harvest, like tracking how much we're harvesting, and we do a lot of small harvests. Is it helpful? I could show you what it looks like now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Please do.
Oh, though I can't do it while I think you need to stop sharing. Yeah.
Yep.
So, so this is what this is from last year. And so currently each harvest date for every item we're entering in the crop, and then there's these various things. So the individual value, and then sort of the quantity, the weight. And so, right, there's like hundreds of them in here.
Right, right.
And then, I have it set to sort of, I have some simple formulas in here to give me, so the total amount that went to the pantry and all here. And then I honestly don't remember anymore quite how I did it. It was from a different spreadsheet workshop, but was able to make a pivot table here. I think that's what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that it gives me total value for each crop. I guess it just was it felt very cumbersome entering it in, especially if I would get behind. And right. I don't know if one answer is maybe creating a Google form that links to it, so I can put the info into a form and it would populate the spreadsheet. But I guess just curious if you have ideas about better ways to, when you're entering lots of data like this, how to do it.
Yeah, well, Shannon and I did talk about Google Forms, and she'd be happy to help you kind of build those to populate things. But I've never used them. I've always gone the long way with the data entry. And I think a couple of things. One is, and someone had mentioned in the pre-class survey, being able to do what's called data validation, which would limit the kinds of things that you can enter into a particular cell. So for example, you'd type BU and you'd get bunch, you'd type BA and you'd get bag, you'd type H and you'd get head, you know, so some shortcuts in terms of the typing.
Right, and it does do that.
Yeah, okay, good. So, I mean, the thing that I'd be interested to see what your pivot table was based on, because I was going to talk about pivot tables, and the first rule of thumb, I didn't really talk about my background very much, but I did major in computer science in undergraduate school. I switched to economics, but then I majored in information systems in my graduate program. And one of the key things that you learn there is that really, if something is unique, it needs to have some sort of unique identifier. And what I didn't really see in your spreadsheet is a unique identifier. What we see is it's unique in that you've got a date and an item, but you have to have two, there's two things that produces the uniqueness. You know what I mean? It's not one thing. It's not like your social security number or something like that, which is, truly unique thing that makes you, you, and points only to you. And so you're kind of missing that piece here.
Okay.
Let me just think for 1 second.
Yeah.
Please. What are the chances that the retail changes or that the bunch changes?
Right. It's a good point. I mean, occasionally, but not that often, right? The unit doesn't really change, but sometimes the bunch size changes, but that not that often. Right. So is there a way to?
Right. And the weight too, right? Because
right, the weight
is tied to the bunch or the
is
bag.
tied to the bunch, but I don't know if we're sort of consistent enough. But it's a good point. I mean, we've sort of changed the different ways that we're doing.
Yeah, SQAs,
Right.
SKUs that's a really good idea, and that is exactly kind of what we're talking about. An SKU would be a unique identifier,
right?
And
that would hold all that information.
Exactly. So then you'd really just do the date and then the SKU, and you can probably set it up so that it drops the stuff in automatically, and then you'd only overwrite it if you knew it was different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful to think about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shannon, do you know how to look, if she brings the pivot table back up again, do you know how to look and see where the whole field structure of how this pivot table was built in Google Sheets? Do you know where that is?
I know, unfortunately, I don't remember.
It might be a right click, or what does that edit do at the bottom there?
Oh, yeah.
There we go. That's it. That's it. So.
Let me know if there's something I should click on.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can get to, I mean, so crop is the thing that it's using as a unique value.
Yep.
It's not paying any attention to the date or anything else. Just the crop, and then it's summing up the total value and summing up the total weight for the crop. Yeah. So I mean, do you look at this pivot table? Is this useful?
I made it at the end of the season, just when I learned how to do this. So I was just trying to experiment with it. I mean, it was useful to look at the end to just kind of get a sense of numbers for different crops. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's do a pivot table on the other spreadsheet and see if we can shine some light on some of this. So let's see. First thing to know about pivot tables is whatever you're going to do the pivot table on has to have a column heading. So this is a requirement. If you try to do a pivot table and you don't have a column heading, it will not like it. And we do not have any unique identifiers here. And I, like I said, don't really like that. So I'm going to add a column here to give myself a blank. And then I'm going to use just this column heading ID. And then I'm going to use that trick that I showed you that's going to allow me to quickly put a unique number on each one of these. Come on. Hit the escape key because I was stuck. There we go. Okay. So now this is my unique ID. So to do a pivot table, you are going to generally hit the all button. It'd be kind of unusual if you weren't. If you had some notes or something at the bottom, you could exclude them by not highlighting that, but mainly you want the whole thing. And then you're going to go to the insert menu and click on pivot table. And it's going to allow us to twist the data around to summarize it the way we want. So first it is asking me for the data that's going to go in the pivot table, and it's already, chosen because I hit the all button. That is the whole range. And then it says, do you want to build a new worksheet or you want to put it someplace in the existing one? I'm going to always do this. So generally when this pops up, I just hit OK. And now I've got some clicking and dragging to do. So the first thing is I'm going to move the unique identifier down into the values section. And it's doing something that I do not want it to do. It's doing a sum, and I really want it to do a count. I want a count of the number of rows that whatever it is I'm filtering on or pivoting on contains. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to change field settings to count. And then it's a simple matter of deciding what I want to pivot on. So let's say I pivot on program name, and I could do it either as the column, which looks kind of ugly. So I think I'll move it over here to the rows. And I can see how many now, what's the count of the number of rows for people in the 16-week CSA versus the first 8 weeks or second 8 weeks. And then I can add multiples. So I could say, give me, say, the city on top of that. And I can either add it as a subset to the row, or I can add it as a column. So now I get a count for the CSA 16. I've got one in Anul, which is a city, one in Bay West, one in East Grail, or none in Bay West, excuse me. One in East Grail, none in East Wirral, one in Kissimmee, et cetera, for a total. This blank, because I've already done my filtering and made sure that my blanks are all correct, I'm going to get rid of that by clicking right click here. And actually, I'm going to click on this down arrow and get rid of this blank so that it collapses it a little bit, because I don't want to see blanks when there's nothing to see. So that's a basic pivot table. They're really quite easy to build once you get past that first panic of what is this thing. And the main thing you want to do is get that unique identifier into the values. If you have to, you can right click. Oh, that was a left click. Value settings and change it to count, because you don't want to add them up. You wouldn't add up somebody's social security numbers, right? You're going to count how many unique social security numbers you had, and then move whatever columns in your spreadsheet are going to allow you to slice and dice the data. Now, when I leave this, because this is just a different worksheet in the same workbook, so I'm going to go back to my totals. And if I change some numbers here, well, let's say we want to do a sum on what's paid, right? So let's just add, let's add a new row. So I'll go here and I'll say my 44th person is another 16-weeker, and they paid the 290, and it's Joe. Let's see how I got this first name. Okay, sure, George Smith. And blah, 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 whatever. We don't really care about that because that's not even our pivot table. So now I go back to my pivot table, which I haven't named. It's still just called sheet. And it hasn't updated the data. You see, I still have 43. I think I need to go to data and do that refresh that I showed you before, which is here. And it should update the data. Now, it just made a liar out of me because it updated automatically. If I go to totals, you can see, no, I still don't have my 44 here. I should be able to get that one. Let's see. What's missing? City. I put the state in, but I didn't put the city, right? No, I did. Okay. What is this? Stump the Chump Day? Oh, it's CSA 16, not 15. Let's try that. Now, refresh. And it's now I've got my 44. So I added, the point is when you add new rows to your data, you can come over your pivot table, hit refresh all, and that data will be incorporated. Now, let's say I wanted to get rid of this and instead put in the sum of what was paid. So now when I just clicked on this, I didn't have to do anything. I mean, I could have clicked and dragged it down here, but in any case, it defaulted to sum. I've got 2, so I've got to get rid of one of them. Remove field. And then there's the sum of what was paid by program. So that's how you did the pivot table back when you did it. It does require that you set the data up in a certain way, though. Again, to have column headings, good to have a unique ID if you're going to do any sort of count. Yeah. One thing I also want to show you, this is kind of back to fundamentals in terms of cut, copy, paste, but these are based on the pivot table. So this is almost like as a formula back here. If I wanted to take this information and put it someplace else, when I put it in the clipboard by doing the Control-C or go up here and I do copy, there's the copy, right? When I go to paste this, I don't really want to do a regular paste. Like, let's say I want to put it in my instructions. What I really want to do is paste special. And to do that, I'm going to right click and click on this paste values and not formulas. And it's not showing a difference here, and it's kind of diluting my what I want to impress upon you is that when you have formulas, when you do a paste special, it ignores the formulas and you don't have to worry about absolute or relative reference or anything else. So paste special, if when you paste something, it just isn't doing what you want it to do, try the paste special, which is here. Paste special values instead of formulas. I see a lot of things in the chat. Are there questions there?
None that I'm seeing yet. Lots
Okay.
of people had to head out a little early, but
Oh, okay. Very good.
yeah, and I was just checking. So in Google Sheets, paste special, it is in the edit menu, so you can go the long route and edit paste special. But I believe in Google Sheets, when you paste cells, it will have a little pop-up. And if you don't click it, it just pastes as usual. But if you do click it, you can say values only, you can say formulas. So that's kind of how it works in Google Sheets.
Great. So the last thing that was on my list, other than printing and page setup, which if you ever do need to print anything, it can be frustrating because it's hard to get things to all show up on one piece of paper, is data validation. So before we go to printing, if you only want someone to be able to type one of these 3 choices, right, CSA 16, 8.2 or 8.8-1, then you can use the data validation to prevent them from doing something else. So to do that, get this out of the way again, there are 1 of 2 ways to do it. One is to build your list somewhere else. So on the instruction sheet, for example, I have this list. Let me just clear all this stuff out and say that that's my list right there, right? So I built the list somewhere else. So that's one option, and then I can refer to it. Or I can go to the data validation, which is on the, which is it on? Where is the darn thing? Here it is. This little icon right here. This would be a good one if you use this to put up on your quick access toolbar, because it's kind of hard to find. But if I go to data validation and tell it that I want to use a specific list, I can put the list here. So I could put what my choices are, separating them by commas. Or, like I said, if I've got a really long list and it's already written down someplace, I can just refer to it. And now see, I've got a drop down. And to make that useful for this entire column, I'm going to Control Shift or Command Shift on the Mac and down arrow to highlight the whole thing so that I can copy it down. I'm going to do Control Home because I've gone so far I can't even see what I'm doing there. But this is where it is. I want to copy this down. So Control Shift and copy it. I mean, I know I can do it this way, but come on. It's not letting me do it. So here's my copy, right? Because I've got the dashed lines. And then when I paste it, it's made each one of these cells have the drop down in it. Well, when you're doing it, when you want to do the whole column from the top to bottom, there is a Control Shift to allow you to do the copy all the way down. So I know someone had asked that question about data validation.
Joan,
Yes.
well, I was just sort of playing with that because I was
Yeah.
thinking potentially that could be helpful for the harvest sheet to have a drop down. I'm not totally sure because it would be a lot of things to choose from, but like a drop down for the crops. And I just started entering some in, but it seems like it's not alphabetizing them. Like, but I don't know if it should automatically do that or if there's a way.
So I think however you enter them in the list is how they'll be, in the drop down.
Okay.
Right. So I started out with 16.
So I would have
Do you
to
want
just
them to be
enter it
automatic
that way.
Yeah,
Yeah, like is
but
there a way to randomly enter them and then it would sort it the way it shows
Yes.
up?
Yes. So let's say this is my list and I want to sort this, right? So I'm going to go to sort and just let me do a different list because I don't know what the heck that's doing, but let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's go Bob, Alice, Tom, right? Now when I sort that, after I've typed them all in, it's put them alphabetically here. And now if I use that in my drop down here, then I'm not going to use the list. I'm going to use a range. So my source is going to be, click on the instructions tab, highlight these, and see how it comes up with equals instructions, $, and then the absolute value. And so now they'll be in alphabetical order because they were in alphabetical order here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
One thing that I know is possible in Google Sheets, and I imagine it's possible in Excel. There's not much that's possible in Google Sheets and not Excel. With data validation is there's a couple options for if somebody types in something that's not on the drop-down list. So when I'm looking at my drop-down list in Google Sheets, it says, if the data is invalid, you can either show a warning or reject the input. So that might be useful for people who are sharing sheets with crew as well. And you don't, you want them to be able to type, maybe they type a crop that is not on your drop-down list, and it'll come up with a little comment, and it'll flag it for you, and you'll be able to go back and either add it to your drop-down list or say, that doesn't seem right. So that's an option, or you can have it reject the input entirely. And then they just don't get to enter data there.
Right. So in Excel, it's this, this is the same dialog box where I did the list and entered my options here or my range. And then I've got this error alert. Doesn't like that. So if I go to error alert, I can have it be a dead stop, a warning, or just information, and then I can put whatever I want the message to be. So same thing. Good call out, Shannon.
And I believe so. Something I've used that for is if you want a cell to have fewer than a certain number of characters in it. And I'm trying to think of an example that you all might be encountering, but it would come up with a little error. So it wouldn't, if somebody types in something that's beyond the character limit, it wouldn't prevent them from entering it unless you, of course, checked the box that stopped them from entering it, but it would just flag it for you as something that you might need to revisit.
Right.
Trying to think of a farm spreadsheet application for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know about farm, but there's lots of examples of when you wouldn't want someone to enter, say a word when you're expecting a number, for example.
Right.
So you can force a number, or you can force a date or a certain length. And I'm not really sure what custom does, but there's an option there. And you can also do between, so you could keep the dates or numbers in between different range. Yeah. Good. Okay, so the last thing that I have on my list is to show you the print preview. So I can get there by going to the file menu and clicking print, and then looking at the preview here on the print page. And this is showing me that my my output is actually right now 3 pages long. And I don't want that. So I'm going to go to page setup to fix it, but I want to show you another way to get there. And that would be to go to my print preview that I put up in my quick access toolbar. And so that was another quick way of getting there. And then also I can go to page layout and go to page setup. And I can see a print preview here, but I can also make some changes. So I have this showing up on 3 pages and I want it on 1. So I'm going to go to the page and say fit on 1 by 1. And now let's see what that looks like. Well, it's all squished in, but that's because of portrait. So I'll change it to landscape. And now it's much better. I can also add grid lines, make it easier to read. And if it were multiple pages, I could also have the headings show up at the top so that it repeated the headings at the top of every page. And I can sometimes squeeze a little more stuff on the page by changing the margin. So this right margin, I'm just going to drop it down a little bit because I got a bigger space over here. And that just makes the text a little bit bigger. some big on not wasting paper and saying, darn, I didn't really want that to print on 2 pages. Is that something that's familiar to everybody, that fit to 1 page? Sometimes if I know it's going to be 2 pages, like, and I want it to be 2 pages, I could say fit to 1 page wide and 2 tall, because I know I've got, 2 pages worth of data, but I don't want it to run off and just have the, email addresses show up on 1 piece of paper all by themselves. I want them to stay on this page with the other data. Good. That's all I have on my list, Shannon. We can do whatever y'all want now.
Sure. So we've got a nice small group here now. I think a lot of folks had to head out and we'll catch the recording, but that gives us more opportunity to answer your specific questions. So those of us who are still here, what specific questions do you all have for Joan while we have her here? And just like Allie did, we can have you share your screen and share your spreadsheet if that's helpful.
I can show you another trick that I like. You see that you have a lot of menus here and a lot of stuff on them, most of which you'll never use. So you can go to File, Options, and Customize Ribbon, and just take the stuff out that you don't use. So I'm not going to draw, and I'm not going to automate, and I don't have any add-ins, and I never do forecasting. So I'm going to take that and remove it. And now when I click OK, I've reduced the number of menu items here. And I can actually just, anything that's on here, I can take off. File, Options, Customize Ribbon.
Another tool I like is the paint format tool. So we didn't talk about formatting today, and it might not be something you even really need for your spreadsheets, but if it gets to be something that's helpful to you, paint format is a really cool tool to highlight an entire range, whether it's a row or a column, and take all the formatting that you put in individually in those cells there maybe, and paint it to the rest of the spreadsheet. So if you, let me think of an example. If you have a bunch of data in one row and you went through and say you formatted column B so that it's all currency, and you formatted column C so that it's all 5-digit zip codes, and you don't want to go through and make those designations for the whole spreadsheet, you just highlight that whole row, click the paint format button, and drag it to the rest of your data, and it copies all of those things that you've already put in into those other rows.
I don't know paint format. Is there a
maybe it's a sheet
thing in
thing.
Excel? Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
We found the one tool that Sheets has that Excel might not.
It could be just a terminology thing, right?
What's that, Kian?
Sorry?
There's paste format only.
Paste format only.
It's a
Yep.
paste special.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Any other questions while we're still here?
Yeah, I have a question, which it's a formatting question. If I end up having a big sheet, which is like all of the orders that customers have placed with us, and I'm trying to add a blank column or a blank row between each customer. And I've just been doing that manually. Is there a way to say, okay, between a different value in this column, add a blank row?
What's the purpose of the blank row?
It's just so that, because we use the spreadsheet I printed out and that's what we use to pack customer orders. It's just a visual break
Okay.
so it's easy to see where one order stops and another one begins.
Yeah, so there is a feature that is related to I don't think it's in here. It's I don't know where it is. It's related to if you think back or have ever seen the old like green accounting paper, you know, how the lines were pale green and dark green and pale green and dark green and separate, you know, so you can make a spreadsheet look like that. You could also, Hannah, one thing would be to hit the all button and then just change the width of, you know, the rows so that they got much bigger than what you needed for the data that was in there. That would give you the, you know, a big enough, you know, slice to be able to cut it. You know what I mean? If that's what the goal is.
Oh, like physically cut it? Yeah, right
is
now
that-
I'm not physically cutting them. I'm just trying to like be able to look at a sheet and know where your order ends and the next person's begins.
Right. Okay. So it is then indeed what you want is like to have them be different colors or something, right?
I suppose I could do that, different orders, different customers in different colors or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Or just every other. And that's what I'm looking for is there's some sort of
Yeah, I
like
do
a
the
s-
every other. I do the format as table. And then there's an every other option. That's what, so, and then I just could choose that top one.
this one,
Yeah, that's what I mean, that's just to be able to see the different rows, but
right?
I've just been trying to figure out an easy way to show where one person's order ends and the next person's begins.
Right. And well, it seems like the colors would do it, but you're saying you want a blank row.
Yeah.
And yeah. So there is a very powerful tool in Excel called a macro. And what a macro is a like a small computer program that you don't have to write the program. All you have to do is have Excel memorize the keystrokes. So it would be possible to have it insert a row using a macro and just have it automated. I'd have to think about how you do that, but it's definitely possible. But it would be faster, I think, than going to each one and hitting insert, right? Which is what you're saying, I think that you're doing. Not even letting me do insert now. Who knows what I was doing there? Making a colorful mess out of my spreadsheet. Oh, I don't know. Now I've frozen. See, it says not responding up here. I've asked it for too much. I was going to go to a blank worksheet and see if I could do it. So I'm still not perfectly clear on why the coloration isn't between the colorization and the width of the rows, why that isn't as good as separating them by a blank row, because that does seem like a lot extra work, right? So that's what you're doing, something like that.
Yeah.
You could also add a bottom border to every row so that there's like maybe a solid black line after every customer.
That's a good idea.
Well, how would I have it be a line just after every customer and not after every row? If one customer orders 15 things,
I
they have
see.
15 rows.
I
mean,
get
I
Oh,
what
would
you're
okay.
saying.
Oh,
Great
all right.
to
So
do that.
I did not have an image either, Shannon, of what we were doing. Okay, now I'm getting what you're looking at there, Hannah. And it's not in conditional formatting, huh?
Not that I've found, but I mean, I don't, I guess I haven't looked at what is top and bottom rules. Is that relevant?
No, that's the,
No.
yeah. So it sounded logical for a second there, right? I think we can build that. Format only cells that contain unique or duplicate values. So we want unique. And we would want the format to be a border, which would be this bottom one. And we will see what happens. So let's do that. And then let's add, let's pretend we've got some chard and we've got some spinach. And we've got this, all this order is for Carol. So I think that actually might work. So get rid of this again.
Hannah, are you in Excel or Google Sheets usually? Oops. We lost Hannah.
I think that's it though. You know, if this is the same client and they have two different things in their order, right? And we do that conditional formatting rule unique. And then do that border. Okay, so it's given me this as unique as well.
I'm going to share my screen for just a minute, Joan, because it might just be a little, it might be a little simpler in Sheets. And Hannah can catch this in the recording. Let's see. Sure, I share the right one with you.
You guys are troopers for sticking this out all the way to 5 o'clock.
So if this is kind of what it looks like, and you have Carol ordering these items and then our next customer over there, what we can do is we can highlight all the rows of the things that Carol ordered, and we can go over to borders and add a top and bottom border. And it doesn't go ahead and put borders in between each of the different crops. It really delineates it by the customer pretty well. So then you could, again, you could go see where David is at and
yeah, but she doesn't want to do it for each customer, I think. You know what I mean? She's manually already entering it. It needs to be automated. So can you make that into a rule? I think if it's possible that if I hadn't highlighted the crops ordered column, it might
May I
have
ask a
worked.
question?
Please.
When this information is in your spreadsheet, does it show up with the customer name on every line? Or does it show up chunked out like it's written here?
It's a good question.
You mean how she has it?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, we
because
don't know.
I used to work with a spreadsheet that I had to do involved importing information from a website and then running a macro and then creating page breaks so that I could print and have the orders broken out. Was
Gotcha.
perhaps my least favorite spreadsheet ever.
Fragile, right?
It was I did not make the spreadsheet, but I had to maintain the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But if the information if it was set up so that the names, so that it was a unique, there was the name was repeated on every row. So Carol showed up before beets, potatoes, carrots, and apples. Then you could theoretically create a way for it to recognize, right, the first
change.
name change.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
And then
that was-
highlight the.
Yeah.
But I think it only works if it shows up on every row.
That's a good point. And I'm going to have you share again, Joan.
Yeah, I think
look at
it depends on what kind of extract Hannah's getting from her ordering system. But if I go back to this format, so it was this rule, and I wonder if I can change the range to be, these columns instead. Let me do the rule again because I don't know how to edit it, tell you the truth. So here we go, unique and format is this and that, and I've got the whole thing highlighted and I don't want that. I only want these. That did it. Right? This whole thing went away because I didn't highlight this column when I made the rule. So the answer to her question is yes, it can be done. We need to see her data so we could try it.
And that's, with it being 5 o'clock, that's a nice segue into what I'm about to share is that if you were here at the beginning, you caught this, but we are happy to do some one-on-one work. Joan is wonderful, and maybe we'll get Joan to do some one-on-one work as well. But at the very least, I can help you out and take a look at the actual data you're working with, if that's helpful, and we can work through it together. And that can be on Zoom or it can be in person as well. That's something we can figure out. So if you're watching this live or if you're watching the recording, know that that is an option to you as well. So with that, unless there's any pressing questions from Allie, Kian, or Rich, I think we're gonna bid you adieu for the night. I hope you're not cross-eyed from all these spreadsheets, but I hope this was really helpful. I hope the recording can be helpful as you get stumped. This is definitely something we want to continue doing. And there's a lot of interest in this workshop when we first announced it. So there will be other iterations of this workshop, but also workshops where we can grow on what we learned today as well. So I will keep you all posted on that. I will send out the recording tonight or tomorrow morning.